Hi. I am Amelia. They say you remember the beginnings more clearly than the middles or the ends. I remember the day David proposed. Not the way most women remember, about the ring, the dinner, the sunset. But I remember how my hands shook as he got down on one knee in the middle of a cluttered art studio. He didn't take me to a fancy restaurant or some candlelit rooftop. He proposed where he knew my heart belonged, among canvases, turpentine, and the smell of paint. I said yes before he could finish his sentence. Back then I thought love was about those kinds of gestures. The surprises. The consideration. The man who noticed what made your world spin and wanted to be a part of it. And for a while he was. For the first 3 years he'd show up at my gallery openings with flowers wrapped in brown paper and compliments that didn't sound rehearsed. He believed in my art even when it didn't sell. He made eggs at midnight when I was deep in a painting. He knew how I liked my coffee, black with a spoonful of condensed milk. But love changes. Or maybe it just reveals. The first crack showed up 2 years after we got married. I was holding a white stick in my hand, locked in the bathroom, willing a second line to appear. It didn't. Just one. Stark. Lonely. I thought I could hide my disappointment. That I could smile and pretend like it was no big deal. But David saw it. And something in him stiffened. He said it was fine. There's always next month. But next month came and went. And then the one after that. And before long, the bathroom drawer was full of empty test wrappers and I started avoiding the mirror entirely. I still painted, but even my colors dulled. Everything on the canvas came out brittle, mechanical. My reds weren't passionate anymore. They were angry. My blues weren't calming, they were hollow. So I told myself we were okay. That this was just a season. Then Ruth came to stay. David's mother was the kind of woman who wore disapproval like perfume. Subtle but suffocating. She'd breeze into the house, her lips pursed, her eyes scanning like I was a museum piece she didn't quite approve of. You know, she said one afternoon, folding laundry she wasn't asked to touch. Some women just aren't meant to be mothers. And that's not a bad thing. Some are career women. Creatives. Not everyone's built for family. I didn't answer. I just walked upstairs and cried into the duvet. David never told her to stop. Not once. If anything, he got quieter every time she opened her mouth. He'd sit at dinner and let her lead the conversation, nodding at her passive-aggressive remarks while I quietly lost pieces of myself. Then came the night I realized what was happening. He was supposed to be home by 7. We were meant to have dinner, take out from the Thai place we both loved. It got cold on the table while I sat there scrolling through my phone. I stumbled onto a photo from his office event posted by one of his co-workers. There she was. Rayleigh. She stood next to him, shoulder brushing his. Her smile was wide, almost too wide, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. David was looking at her, not the camera. That's what did it. The way he looked at her. Focused. Soft. Like she was the only one in the room. I told myself I was imagining it. But then came the late nights. The vague explanations. The sudden interest in gym memberships and cologne. One night I confronted him. Are you seeing someone? I asked straight out. No games. I was too tired for games. He didn't say no. He just stared at the floor and whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen. That's when I knew. In that moment, all the carefully taped frames of our life, the dinners, the photo albums, the shared dreams, began to crack. He said he needed something more fulfilling. That he couldn't keep living in limbo. That really made him feel alive. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just stood there numb. It was a strange kind of grief, one that didn't look like sobbing or punching walls. It was quiet. A settling. Like dust on something once treasured. He left 2 days later. Ruth didn't call. Rayleigh didn't care. And I was left in a house full of art I couldn't finish and silence that wouldn't stop echoing. People think heartbreak happens in one big moment. It doesn't. It's slow. It chips away until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman standing there. That was me. Unrecognizable. Alone. And infertile. But what I didn't know then was that loss, true loss, is a brutal kind of rebirth. It destroys what's weak so something stronger can take root. I didn't know it yet, but that woman in the mirror wasn't broken. She was just beginning. The first thing I did after David left was shut the nursery door. It had been our someday project. A soft yellow room with white trim and a mobile shaped like stars that we bought on a whim during a weekend in Asheville. We didn't have a baby. We didn't even have a name picked out. But the room was our hope. Our little promise to the universe. Now it felt like a lie. I closed the door and told myself I wouldn't open it again. Not until it meant something. Not until I was ready to stop feeling like a failure every time I saw the pale sunlight filter through the lace curtains. I spent the next week surviving in pieces. The house was too big for one person. The silence stretched out like a second skin. Even the creaks in the floorboards felt louder now, like the walls were whispering reminders of what I'd lost. I started drinking tea instead of coffee. Something about the ritual felt comforting. Less jarring. I moved through my days in pajamas. Ate dry cereal out of the box. Slept on one side of the bed because the other side still smelled like him. People say time heals all wounds, but they forget to mention how slowly it moves in the beginning. Then came the doctor's call. I almost didn't answer. I saw the number and froze, the phone buzzing in my hand. My last test results. The ones I'd taken before David left. I hadn't told him. Part of me hoped I wouldn't need to. That it would be the miracle call. It wasn't. Amelia, the doctor said gently, I'm afraid the results aren't what we hoped. Your hormone levels suggest a diminished ovarian reserve. IVF is still possible, but the success rate would be low with your own eggs. I didn't cry. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the floor for a long time. It was a kind of grief that didn't fit neatly into a box. Like mourning someone who never even had a chance to exist. Later that evening, Callie showed up. She didn't knock. Just walked right in like she always did, holding 2 bags. One with takeout, the other with wine. I brought the good stuff, she said, tossing her keys on the counter. And no, I'm not leaving. Don't even try. I didn't have the energy to protest. She poured us glasses and we sat on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch. She didn't say anything at first. Just sat there, sipping slowly like we had all the time in the world. Then she looked at me. You don't have to pretend this doesn't hurt, she said. You're not weak because you're grieving. I looked down at my wine. I don't even know what I'm grieving. My marriage? A baby I'll never have? The version of myself that used to be hopeful. All of it, she said. And you're allowed to grieve every part of it. That night she stayed over. We watched reruns of Parks and Recreation until we passed out. For the first time in weeks I slept more than 4 hours. But the emptiness didn't vanish. It clung to me, especially in the mornings. I'd wake up and instinctively check my phone, half expecting a message from David. Something like I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I love you. Nothing ever came. One morning, after one of those long, brutal silences, I walked past the nursery door and stopped. I opened it. The air smelled stale. The paint was still fresh-looking though. The stars on the mobile twirled lazily in the draft. There were books on the shelf we never got to read. Goodnight Moon, The Giving Tree, Where the Wild Things Are. My fingers lingered on the spines. I sat on the rocking chair. Let my body feel the absence. And then I wept. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't cinematic. It was ugly, gasping, fetal position kind of grief. But I let it out. Every scream I'd swallowed. Every sob I'd choked down when Ruth made me feel like a defective factory. Every "you'll be fine" from well-meaning friends who didn't understand what it was like to watch your dreams collapse in slow motion. When the tears dried, I felt hollow, but lighter. I went downstairs and found my old sketchbook. The one I hadn't touched since before the doctor's visit, before David started pulling away. The first page was blank. Waiting. I didn't know what I was drawing when I started. My hand moved before my brain caught up. Shapes, lines, angles, disjointed, chaotic. But something shifted with every stroke. The silence that had been haunting the house now sat beside me, a quiet observer rather than an intruder. Hours passed. The sun shifted. Callie texted to check in, but I didn't respond. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I might still become. It didn't feel like healing yet, but it felt like a beginning. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. It started with a single email. The kind of email that shouldn't mean anything. A simple subject line. Sunday dinner. Hope you can make it. But it wasn't from a friend. Or my sister. Or even David. It was from Ruth. Yes, David's mother. She hadn't spoken to me since he left. Not a call. Not even a text to feign concern. But now, just like that, she was inviting me to Sunday dinner as if nothing had happened. As if my marriage hadn't imploded. As if she hadn't stood in my kitchen 3 months ago, folding my laundry, and said, Some women just aren't cut out for motherhood. I stared at the screen. The message was short. Too short. Almost smug. We'll be having a small gathering at the house this Sunday. David will be there. Thought it might be good to talk and reconnect. Hope you're doing well. Ruth. No question mark. No warmth. Just a suggestion dressed as a command. I didn't respond. But I thought about her more than I wanted to. Ruth had always been a shadow in our marriage. Present but untouchable, hovering just behind David like a ghost tethered to his spine. She never raised her voice. He didn't need to. Her criticisms came laced in politeness, sugar-coated in just a suggestion, and I didn't mean it that way. She always made me feel like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Like I was the stand-in for the real wife David should have married. Someone practical, fertile, and not so emotionally volatile. David never defended me. Not once. First I excused it. I told myself he didn't want to upset her. That he was keeping the peace. But over time his silence started to feel like alignment. Like he agreed. One night, not long after our second failed fertility attempt, she came to visit. I'd just gotten home from a gallery submission rejection. I was exhausted raw. And she was sitting in my living room with a glass of Chardonnay and that carefully bored expression she always wore when she deemed the furniture subpar. She took one look at me, disheveled, tear-streaked, and said, "I suppose everyone processes disappointment differently." I blinked. "What?" She smiled. "It's not a criticism, darling. Just an observation. I only mean, perhaps you should take a break from all the art. Focus on healing. On preparing yourself mentally, emotionally if you still hope to conceive." That was Ruth. She dressed knives and lace and expected you to thank her for the blood. And David? He sat beside her, sipping his beer, pretending not to hear. The worst part wasn't what she said, it was how easily I swallowed it. How I nodded. How I tried to apologize for my sadness. I was so desperate to be accepted. To be part of their picture-perfect family. Now that picture was torn. That evening I threw out the wine glasses she'd gifted us on our wedding day. I kept them out of habit. But I realized I hated them. Too thin. Too fragile. Just like her praise. Smash. Smash. It felt good. I went back to my sketchbook after that. The drawing I'd started the day before. What I now realized was a woman bent forward, arms outstretched, reaching for something just out of frame, suddenly made sense. It was me. Reaching. Still reaching. Callie called that night. She always seemed to know when I was close to a spiral. "Did you get the email?" she asked without greeting. Of course she knew. "Yeah," I said. "And?" I ignored it. "Good," she exhaled. "God, I was worried you'd show up with a casserole or something." I smiled faintly. Tempting, but no. There was a pause. "She's poking," Callie said. "Trying to see if you're still weak enough to be controlled." I didn't answer. Because part of me still wondered if Ruth wanted something else. Maybe guilt. Maybe to deliver a carefully staged apology that made her feel better about herself. Or maybe she just wanted to remind me that she still had David. The next morning I checked my social media. A mistake, I know. But curiosity is a cruel thing. David had posted a photo. Him, Rayleigh, and a glass of champagne. She looked airbrushed, filtered. Her eyes bored. His smile was forced. The caption read, "New chapters." I stared at the screen, my throat dry. New chapters. What a joke. Rayleigh didn't want a family. She'd made that clear from day one. I'd heard from one of the women at his firm. Rayleigh referred to kids as career anchors. Her words, not mine. So why did he leave me? Why did he choose her? Was it really just about babies? Or had I become something he didn't want to fix? My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I stared at the screen, my pulse loud in my ears. No apology. No call. Just a cryptic one-liner I wasn't supposed to respond to. I didn't. Instead, I opened my sketchbook again. I started a new drawing. A woman standing upright this time. Her arms no longer reaching. Just open. Callie was right. Ruth could poke all she wanted. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. I was changing. Slowly. Messily. But I was learning to stop reaching for people who only ever offered shadows. Sometimes silence is louder than any scream. After David's text, the silence between us didn't stretch. It thickened. Like fog on a winter morning, damp and heavy. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What would I say? Thanks for the vague guilt trip. Now kindly vanish back into the arms of the woman you left me for? It had been 2 weeks since Ruth's email and that one-line message from David. No follow-up. No call. Just static. Maybe he expected me to come running. Maybe he still saw me as the woman who used to bend first, apologize first, explain first. But that version of me had shed its skin. Still, the silence lingered like an old bruise. I went back to painting. Not because I felt inspired, God no, but because I needed somewhere to put the noise in my head. I painted furiously. Late into the night. Wild angry strokes. All reds and blacks and deep punishing grays. Women bound in wire. Birds trapped in jars. A child's hand reaching through cracked glass. Every canvas became a battlefield. And I was bleeding on all of them. You're either going through something or birthing a revolution, Callie said when she stopped by one afternoon, arms full of bagels and baby spinach. Either way, I approve. I gestured toward the chaos of canvases stacked against the walls. Is it obvious? Only if you have eyes. She picked up one of the paintings, an abstract one I hadn't meant for anyone to see. It was a swirl of female forms caught in barbed wire, all faceless except for one in the center with a gaping red mouth. This one, she said, narrowing her eyes. This feels like someone finally screamed back. I shrugged, unsure how to explain it. The truth was I wanted to scream at David. To shout all the things I hadn't said. That he made me feel like a stranger in my own body. That he let his mother carve me open with her words and stood there like a coward. That he broke something precious not because it was irreparable, but because he was too scared to try. But instead of screaming, I painted. It felt safer. It felt more mine. That evening I found myself scrolling again. A post from one of David's colleagues showed up. A casual dinner party. Everyone smiling. Rayleigh leaning into some guy who wasn't David. Her hand resting a little too intimately on his shoulder. Took me a second. Then I remembered him, Jonas, a divorced senior partner from another firm. He'd been at the same event where I first met Rayleigh. Even then she'd laughed a little too easily at his jokes. So much for new chapters. I clicked away. Closed the app. Felt nothing. Or at least I wanted to. But something beneath the surface twisted. Not because I still loved David but because I realized how easily I'd been replaced. And maybe worse, how quickly he'd settled for less just to avoid sitting with himself. Later that night I stood in the kitchen boiling water for tea when I heard the knock. Not a light tap. 3 solid raps. My stomach tightened. When I opened the door he was there. David. The same man who once promised me forever now stood in a gray hoodie and jeans. A canvas bag slung over his shoulder. Eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. For a full minute we just stood there. The hallway light casting long, uneven shadows between us. Hi, he said finally. Why are you here? He glanced down then back up at me. I don't know. I was in the neighborhood. I almost laughed. In the neighborhood. Like he'd accidentally wandered onto the street where I lived and thought, hey, might as well ruin Amelia's evening while I'm at it. I crossed my arms. I'm not doing this with you. I know, he said. I keep thinking about everything I didn't say. He reached into the bag and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. My breath caught. It was one of my paintings. One I'd gifted him during our 2nd anniversary. Before the tests, before Ruth's barbed advice, before Rayleigh. I found this when I moved out of her place, he said. She hated it. Said it was too intense. But I couldn't throw it away. I didn't reach for it. He held it a moment longer then leaned it gently against the wall. I made a mess of everything, he said. I didn't protect you. I didn't fight for us. No, I said, my voice steady. You didn't. There was a long silence. I think I just panicked, he admitted. Everything felt like it was slipping away and I thought, maybe starting over with someone new would fix it. But it didn't. I was still the same man. Still broken. I hated how familiar he still sounded. How honest he suddenly felt. Too little, too late. I shook my head. You don't get to come back now and rewrite the story. I'm not trying to. I needed to say it. Then say it, I said. He swallowed. His eyes glassed over. I'm sorry. The words floated there between us like a lost balloon. He turned and walked back down the steps. Didn't wait for forgiveness. didn't push. And maybe that was the most surprising part, he left me with silence again. But this time it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. I didn't expect to see her in daylight. Rayleigh always seemed like someone who belonged to low lighting and expensive cocktails. Her voice like sugar over glass, her lips always painted a little too red. But there she was, standing just outside the art studio where I volunteered on weekends, her phone pressed to her ear and a frown tugging at the corners of her mouth. For a moment I thought she didn't see me. I considered walking away, pretending we were strangers. But then her eyes met mine. And she smiled. Not the warm kind. The kind people where when they've already rehearsed what they're about to say. She ended her call and strode across the sidewalk like she'd been waiting for me. Well, this is awkward, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. But also kind of inevitable, don't you think? I didn't respond. She tilted her head, studying me the way someone might examine an artifact. I heard you're showing at the Wilmot Gallery next month. Congrats. I blinked. How do you know that? He shrugged. Word gets around. Or David told her, I thought. Of course he did. Maybe right before she cheated on him. Rayleigh didn't seem ruffled. She pulled her sunglasses down from her head and slid them on slowly, like she was prepping for a scene. I guess I owe you an apology, she said. I raised an eyebrow. You guess. I didn't mean for it to get messy, she said, crossing her arms. David and it wasn't supposed to be serious. I let out a small laugh. Well, it wasn't. Her lips parted and for the first time I saw a flicker of discomfort. I mean it, she said. I didn't realize he still had so much attachment to you. That word, attachment, made something hot rise in my chest. As if I were some failed project he was still emotionally indebted to. A once-loved sweater he couldn't quite throw out. I stepped forward. You didn't take him from me, Rayleigh. He left. She blinked, surprised. I'm not mad at you, I said. I'm mad at him, for not having the courage to face the pain of staying. But you. I gave her a tight smile. You were just the escape hatch he ran through. That seemed to hit something. Her posture stiffened. I didn't plan to fall for a married man. Please, I said, cutting her off. You didn't fall. You climbed. For a moment we stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, two women with completely different lives but somehow the same man stitched between them. I didn't feel rage. Not anymore. What I felt was something colder, detachment. She looked away first. He's miserable, you know. That's not my problem. But it could be again. I stiffened. Her voice softened. He still loves you, Amelia. I looked her in the eye and said what I didn't realize I'd known until that moment. I don't care. And I meant it. Rayleigh blinked rapidly. Wow. I just expected more sympathy from someone who understands what it's like to be unwanted. That stung, but not the way she'd hoped. I was never unwanted, I said, my voice steel. He just didn't know how to handle someone who refused to break for him. I turned and walked into the studio, heart pounding, not because of her but because of how easy it was to let her go. Inside, the light from the high windows cut across the hardwood floors, painting the room in wide, golden beams. My students, mostly women, mostly older, were gathered around their easels, chatting softly, brushes dancing. It smelled like linseed oil and possibility. I grabbed my apron and took my place near the front. For 2 hours I talked about color theory and texture. I circled the room, giving feedback and gentle encouragement. And as I watched a 70-year-old woman laugh with paint on her nose and a single mother sketching her toddler from memory, I felt something bloom inside me. Purpose. When the session ended, one of the students, Linda, lingered behind. You seem lighter today, she said as she cleaned her brushes. Do I? She smiled. Like someone who just laid something heavy down. I thought about Rayleigh, about her cheap little apology and how much I used to fear her. No. She was just a woman stuck in the middle of a story she never really understood. I looked back at Linda. Maybe I did. Outside, the sky had softened to pink. I walked home slowly, letting the air move through me like a tide. When I passed the corner flower shop, I stopped and bought myself a bouquet. Tulips and daisies. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to say you're still here. At home, I placed the flowers in a jar on the kitchen table. Not a vase. Just a jar. Something ordinary. Something that had carried sauce last week and now life. I sat by the window, sketchbook in my lap, And this time I didn't draw a woman in pain. Or broken. Or reaching. I drew a woman looking forward. Not smiling. Not triumphant. But free. Enough for now. Check out part 2. It continues immediately from where we left off.